Hello, welcome to Miss Peepers Reading Corner. I'm Katrina, aka Miss Peepers. Let's talk about banned books. This month is dedicated to the discussion of banned books. And the goal here is to educate, but also to encourage you to seek out the books that you want to read and not let somebody else, especially a stranger who has access to your library, tell you what you can and cannot read. Today we're going to be talking about Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This book is set in a dystopian future in a society that values efficiency and scientific advancement, and everyone in this society is a genetically designed clone. So humans are no longer born, but rather created in a lab and brought up within a facility and brainwashed essentially to the beliefs of the society so that everyone can be a productive and happy member. Happiness is very important, and if you're not happy, there's a pill for that. Also, sex is very important, not for procreation. Procreation is gross. However, sex is great, and you should have it with as many people as possible. And it's kind of weird if you only want to have sex with one person. That's odd. Or if you don't at all, that's even weirder. We follow a man named Bernard who is a little bit different from everybody else. And there are rumors amongst his peers that his test tube where he was designed in the lab may have been interfered with in some way. There's talk of maybe some alcohol ended up in there when it shouldn't have, or something along those lines. So he doesn't quite think like everybody else. He manages to get by, he manages to blend in, but throughout the course of this story, he becomes more and more discontented to a degree that the drugs just don't solve. And he wants to have a relationship with one person, and he's reaching for something that his society cannot offer him. There's also a segment of this book during which Bernard visits what is essentially a nature preserve for what this society calls savages. That is, people who do not prescribe to the accepted genetic modifications, drugs, and orgies that occur as a regular course of their society, but who rather live without drugs, well, with different drugs, without the intense scientific advances that the society around them have developed, and who have sex for the sake of making babies and like giving birth to them, which is something that this society that Bernard comes from just finds so abhorrent. To the point at which like mother, father, family, those are dirty words to this society. So he sees two different societies and he doesn't fully feel connected to either of them. So we follow a man trying to find himself in a society that is not designed for introspection. You can probably already guess a bit why this book has been challenged. I will read a quote because this kind of sums up everything. I will also say that there have been English teachers who have actually been fined for teaching this book, which is just a bit much to me. I can't. I can't. This book has been banned because it is sordid, immoral, obscene. It vilifies the family. There's too much sex, and it encourages drug use. So let's break this down. I would agree that the society that is described in this book is sordid and immoral. The society described in this book vilifies the family. We already talked about that. They do have a lot of sex and they do use drugs. Obscenity, I feel, is in the eye of the beholder. I didn't find this book obscene per se, but that's me. But regardless, this is an instance for me in which the challenger didn't really read and understand the book that they were reading. The society that Aldous Huxley is showing here does vilify the family. Huxley is not representing this society as one in which people should in fact live. Also included in my edition of this book is Brave New World Revisited, which is a series of essays that Huxley wrote about 25 years after Brave New World was published, in which he reflects on what he wrote and how his opinion has changed or not changed about the trajectory that society is on. And There's a great 60 Minutes interview with him that is on YouTube, so I'll link it in the description, in which Huxley talks about, in the 60s, talks about where he sees our society going. And it's spooky, y'all. It is spooky. Because while it didn't happen exactly as he said, there are definitely elements of what he talked about happening today. Yeah, he was a smart guy. He thought about things a lot, and he was concerned about what we're doing. And a lot of the themes within this book are around a society that chooses distraction, that chooses to drug itself. Yes, people are genetically modified. Yes, the deck is stacked against them, but he talks about how humans can be induced to do the easy thing instead of the right thing, to indulge in pleasures rather than seek out challenges and pain. And while certainly there are people who seek out challenges, don't get me wrong, and Huxley was certainly not saying everyone to an individual is like this. For anyone who has been kindly nudged by their streaming service, are you still watching? Are you still there? Or lost an afternoon to video games, we know how easily this can be done. It's a little bit different for most of us than living your entire life like this. But Huxley has called out something that happens with all of us, or can happen with all of us. And he's warning us to watch out for it. Huxley was not anti-family. He was not presenting this promiscuousness and drug abuse as the right thing to do. Bernard is figuratively banging on the windows, the windowed wall, trying to get out of this society, and he doesn't have anywhere to go because the entire world around him is not right from his standpoint, and the entire world around him thinks he is not right. And it's so uncomfortable. It's beautifully written. It's just such an incredibly stark view of humanity. And it's a good one to read in conjunction with 1984 by George Orwell, because those two books were published close to each other, I think about a decade apart, and the two authors knew each other. Orwell was actually Huxley's student at one time, and then when Orwell graduated and became an adult, they became colleagues and friends as well, and they respected each other's work. And while they both agreed that humanity is going to hell in the proverbial handbasket, they designed the basket very differently. And so they're interesting books to read together to see the similarities and the differences. But I digress. I do love me some dystopian fiction. Back to the challenges. I understand the concern about sex, about drug use, about how easily the characters in this book lean on those things without thinking about it. But I think it's important to give readers, and I wouldn't put this in an elementary school library, but high schoolers absolutely should be able to read this. And they should be able to read it critically, and they should be able to understand it. Like a lot of the books that we're talking about this month, the challengers often miss the point of what the book is actually saying, and instead take that surface comment or take a scene or a sentence out of context and say, this is what the book is teaching the child. And that can happen in a lot of ways. It could be reading over your kid's shoulder because they brought the book home, or reading their essay and saying, what do you mean you read this? Or having read it themselves when they were younger and not really remembering it, but remembering there was that orgy scene. And it's really unfortunate that adults don't always read critically, especially when they are trying to say that a book is good or bad for someone else. You don't have to read every book as if it's a school assignment. I don't. I certainly read books sometimes just for the pure escapism of it. And this book to me was a bit of both, honestly. There was a lot in here that made me think, and there were some things that I was like, I'm on a sci-fi ride. And I think that's healthy. I think that's good to be able to read books in different ways depending on what's going on. And at no point when I was reading this did I think, gosh, Huxley wants me to get high and have a lot of sex. That is not what this book is saying. And when he describes it, it sounds dreary, and not just because that getting high and going to an orgy doesn't appeal to me, but also just because of the way he talks about it. From Bernard's point of view, Bernard is not there for this. It is not presented as something that is meant to be persuasive. At any rate, if you have not read Brave New World and it sounds interesting to you, I do highly recommend it. I really enjoyed this one, and it's one that I'd like to reread sometime, as I've read it once, and it's one that I think I could read again and get even more out of it than I did the first time. So perhaps I'll do that at some point. Maybe it's a vlog, we'll see. Have you read Brave New World or anything else by Aldous Huxley? If so, let me know in the comments what you thought of it, and either way, I will see you in the next one.